Welcome to the Society Pod, a podcast for entrepreneurs, marketers, and leaders. Here's your host, Jessica Yarmy.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Society Pod. My guest today, he's spent his entire career in the fitness industry, but in roles ranging from gym owner to coach to consultant to podcast host. So I would say he's one of the most multifaceted leaders in the fitness industry. Welcome to the show, Eric Malzone.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. That's great. Multifaceted. I'm going to go, as soon as it's done, I'm going to tell my wife, I'm like, I don't think you give me enough recognition for being multifaceted.
You should definitely lean into your multifaceted superpower a little bit more, but you're involved in so many different things. So how do you introduce yourself when you meet somebody new?
That's really hard, actually. A lot of people I know here in Montana, especially my wife's friends, she's got these group of volleyball people and they always ask me what I do and I stumble. I'm like, oh, I've been in the industry, and I give all these things I do. And they're like, you work for the CIA. I was like, no, I wish that'd be a lot cooler, but it's really hard thing to say. I mean, I have been in the industry now for 18 years, coach and gym owner, and waist deep in the world of podcasting and then specifically to fitness, health, and wellness, because I recognize, like you do, all the value that you get out of podcasting. It's not just a linear journey of like, I'm going to build an audience. Right? No, there's so much tertiary value that comes to it. And I think from that, my podcasting career has opened up so many doors that I've been opportunistic in how to approach different things and been selective about it. So yeah, I would say first and foremost, I'm a podcast host, what I would tell people.
Well, and now you can layer in, you're a multifaceted podcast host and content creator, all of the different things. Yeah. I'm definitely going to lean into podcasting at the end because I feel like it's going to be free consulting for me. But I want to kind of start with your fitness background because you truly have been in the fitness industry really for your entire career. Did you set out to build it that way, or did that really just happen?
I didn't set out to do that. I'll kind of give you the short of it. Like many people in the industry, I would describe myself as an athlete, or for most of my life, starting at like age 5. So I was a competitive swimmer and then got into water polo right around middle school and then played that through college and club. After school, I didn't really know what I was going to do. My whole career was not spent in fitness. I actually spent about 9 years in corporate America doing various forms of sales, from like radio ad sales to legal publishing sales, which is like the most boring thing ever. I saw this whole career path of where I was going to go, and I did well. I would have been probably VP by age 35. It's one of these companies because sales trajectory was really good. But I saw like the future and I looked down the path, like some conferences, and I was like, okay, there's someone who's been in this industry 10 years longer than me. I'm like, I don't think that's the kind of person I want to end up as. What happened, I got a text message around 2008, an old college teammate, Traver Bohm, and it just said, hey man, do you want to open a gym? I had been doing CrossFit for about 6 months. He'd been doing it for about a year and a half, down at CrossFit LA. I just went to happy hour that evening and texted him back. And I said, yeah. And that was it. So 6 months later, we had a gym. Can't say I had this vision at a young age of what I want to do, or I had this major aha moment. What I did know is I wanted to be my own boss. And I knew fitness and strength well. I looked at the CrossFit gym model. I'm like, this isn't super complicated. I can do this. It was just early. 08, 09 was very early. But, we went for it. And there was definitely a couple lean, tough years, but then everything picked up.
So as you moved from sales into fitness, but then owning a gym into coaching or into consulting, or you kind of have this circuitous like move through the fitness industry. How do you decide when to make those slight turns in your career path?
I think you kind of know. If I look back, about every 8 years, I change loosely. I make a major move. And I think something inside me says it's time for a change. A fresh start, somewhere doing something new. And Steve Martin, the comedian, right? And he looks at like life in 10-year spans. Like for 10 years, he's going to work on something and master it and then move on, right? Like I think right now in his 60s, he's mastering the banjo, right? So obviously he's made a ton of money. He doesn't have to worry about money, but banjo is his thing. And I feel like everyone kind of has that. If they listen to it, they have that thing in them where they're like, okay, I'm going to really work hard at something and then I'm going to reflect and then take an opportunity and try something new. And I think that's ultimately kind of the spice of life, right? You want to try new things, you want to do different chapters. And I think in today's day and age, you don't just pick a company and work there for 40 years until you get your pension. That doesn't really exist anymore. You have the opportunity to reinvent yourself so many times. I can't say I had a clear plan, but there was always something inside me that said, hey, it's time for something new.
As you're opening new chapters, you're not necessarily at this point closing old chapters. It seems like you're more like adding on, and you have like this layered universe that you play in. How do you juggle between all of the different things that you're currently a part of?
Well, I look at it as like you can only hold so many bags of groceries at once. right? At some point, you have to put one down if you want to pick another one up. You can't just keep picking up groceries. Everything's going to fall over. It's going to spill all over the place. It's going to be embarrassing. Everyone's going to laugh at you in the parking lot. And you don't want that. So I think ultimately, like, yeah, I keep picking certain things up, but I'm also looking at things that maybe aren't fulfilling me or aren't as effective as I thought they would be. And I'm just simply gracefully letting those go. I think there's a big difference too between quitting and letting things go. Quitting would say that like you're giving up on a great opportunity, but sometimes the best thing in life is realizing like holding on to this too tight. It's just time to let it go. I'm 48 now, Jessica. I'm just starting to really understand what brings me joy and what I'm good at. Like it's taken that long. I may be wrong. Like 10 years from now, we could do this podcast again. I'd be like, oh, I was such an idiot back then. But I think that's part of it too, is like you just start to see the trends of like, okay, this is what I feel like I can be truly good at and something that I want to pursue. And I have the opportunity, so I'm going to do it. So a lot of it's just gut instinct or maybe just lack of overthinking.
Entrepreneurship allows you to dabble in a couple of different things. And I do think your setup is an interesting setup because they do kind of play off of each other. And I gave a very high level intro of you, but can you outline like what are the things that you're a part of and how does the ecosystem fit together?
When I started podcasting in 2017, similar to you, it was just mostly curiosity and I just didn't stop. Kept interviewing people, getting access to people I felt like were bigger guests in my world and people I want to interview. As that journey progressed, I got to work for different startups and I got to see, I think you and I crossed paths when I was at Morpheus. Jim Kroll and I were there. You were at Kickhouse, right? We were talking about maybe some integrations. So I got to see all that. And then, but the thing I was noticing was like, what do I really enjoy? The thing that drives everything and everything that fires me up, like Fridays I do recordings like we are today. It's the best day of the week. Right? It's the thing I love the most. And I know it brings a lot of value to my life and other people too. And then I started noticing, I'm like, well, what are the problems around this thing that I love doing? There's actually a lot of them, which is cool because it's such a young, maturing space, right? The whole medium is still relatively young. You know, if we're looking at this at baseball, we're only in the fourth inning of podcasting. It's just starting to emerge. So I'm like, well, the big thing I noticed was like, I get pitched a lot. Like I get a lot of pitches for people to be on my podcast now. A lot of it is AI junk. It's only getting worse. There's got to be a better way. A lot of it's just lazy. So I'm like, well, what if we did it right? You know, it's not that hard to do it right. So that was like one problem. What if we can do this whole podcast PR thing better? And then I started to see like, well, a lot of the guests get on and they are either not prepared or they're not understanding the opportunity or they're not optimizing for each opportunity. And that comes down to like storytelling and impact and knowing the audience and all those things. And then the other problems I've seen in podcasting is like there's very few reliable ways to get paid audience growth specific to your vertical. If you have a very specific audience, you could do Instagram. I mean, you're a marketing guru, like you can do Instagram and Facebook and some Google stuff, but it's really hard specifically to podcast to track it. So we came up with a solution for that. All these things I've noticed are just problems that I've experienced. And that's where we kind of came up with the Podcast Collective about a year and a half ago is we place executives on podcasts specifically for the purpose of like business development, right? Because we understand not only does Jessica have a great podcast, but we understand what Jessica does for work, what her passions are, her network. You know, how can we bring value to the podcast host and create the link between the guest and the host that's more valuable than just an interview? So of all these different things, we saw the underlying ecosystem, how it could be leveraged better, how we could help more and solve more problems within the space. And that's kind of how we started the collective.
So you do podcast bookings, you do podcasts, being a guest on a show to being a host on a show. Now you're also talking about getting into promoting. Do you want to talk about that yet?
I think that's very specific about what we do. We are not just looking to place people on podcasts. Like we want to grow businesses using podcasts. That's the goal. So it's very different. It's sleight of hand when you talk about the words I'm actually using. But when you look at it in practice, it's like, no, we want to develop businesses. And that means developing strategic partnerships. I want to know what Jessica does. I want to know what's valuable to her on the business front. So when we make an introduction to Brandon from Metabolic, right? There's a good business case outside the podcast. We create a lot of strategic partnerships and business for people. So on the promotional piece, we partnered with a company that I've been testing out for many months. And it's very simple. So like I've been using test budgets of $500. So let's say one of your past episodes you thought was really valuable. You think it's a good hook for people to get introduced to your brand and your podcast, and maybe they'll click and subscribe. We just create a link and it's not complicated. We create a 2-minute clip, some really nice artwork, and then we essentially inserted it into multiple select publications. One of the major ones, Men's Journal, right? So it's banner ads, but it's dynamic, and then it clicks through and it actually counts as a download because it gets a certain amount of time. That's what we're doing. It's not rocket science, but it's never been applied to my knowledge. You could probably tell me better, but it hasn't been applied specifically to podcasting and then getting really targeted with the type of periodicals we want to reach.
I think my approach to podcasting has been, we'll say, less strategic than that. It's been more about just generally being out there, dipping my toe into it. One of the things that I like most about being online, whether somebody finds me through a podcast or through LinkedIn or something, the more channels you can have out there that just allow you to be you, then when people meet you, they're like, oh, I feel like I already know you. And so it's this relationship acceleration element. And with podcasting being long form, I think it's so much more opportunity to be deeper relationship acceleration. And so I've had those conversations and I've had people say to me, yeah, I feel like I already know you, or you're exactly as you are online. I'm like, that's the point, is just to be out there and to be true to you. I love that you're doing that. And I feel like you've at this point been a part of so many different episodes and even so many different shows that you're able to bring expertise to the table. Outline for us, like, how many shows have you been a part of? And what's your general estimate of how many episodes?
Personally, I've had 3. So I've had Future Fitness, which is still going. I did Fitness Blitz Radio for a while, 5 days a week, a daily episode, Monday through Friday, short interviews, 20, 30 minutes with fitness professionals from all over the world. I did about 350, 400 of those. So that was a grind, but super useful. I had Black Diamond podcast that I did for a while. It was more of like a personal journey. In the pandemic, I just wanted to interview people who were experts in fields, like Black Diamond, the skiing, Black Diamond's for experts. And that one, it was just too much time. I couldn't do it all. Picked up a couple other ones. And I also do Athletech Unscripted with Eddie Hertzman for that one. So we get some really cool big names for that one. We just had Anthony Geisler from Exponential fame, who's starting his new sequel brands now. So I don't know if people know that, but breaking news. So yeah, I've done a lot of them. And I think somewhere at least 800, maybe closer to 1,000 total interviews.
I'm on 48. I feel like even between 1 and 48, I look back at 1 through 5 and I'm like, oh, okay, I would have done that so differently. And now it takes less time to prepare in some ways. So I think there's definitely been an evolution even from 1 to 48. So as you're now sitting at the thousands, what do you do now that you wish you would have done when you started? Or are there critical lessons that you've learned along the way that you want to share?
I wouldn't change anything I did with earlier podcast. I think it was all part of the necessary process. You gave me a great list of questions. You obviously did research. You prepared. I did the same exact thing. I wanted to go into the interview confident and ready. This kind of was like the thing that allowed me to do the proper preparation. And over time, you start to relax a little bit. You start to sit into the interview more. You start to feel it out. You become more present. And you look for the opportunities to take conversations to areas that maybe you didn't expect. I took this improv comedy thing at my gym. We had this thing called Third Thursdays where we had people from outside the gym come do these Thursday night sessions. And we had improv comedy, which became a really favorite one. So we had them back every once in a while, like once a quarter. And one of the things they had was this thing called What's in the Box, right? So it was like you'd be in this big circle and the box is empty, but you would take it and someone would say, oh, check out this miniature alligator. And they would give you the box. And then you'd have to riff on that. You're like, okay. And you didn't know what they were going to say until they passed it to you, right? And you'd have to come up with something. And then I would pass it to you. Am I right, Jessica? Right? Then you had to be like, riff on whatever I said. And the fear was you're always going to feel like there's nothing in the box. You're just going to stare at the box and your brain's going to go blank, right? The fact of the matter is, there's always something in the box. Your brain always creates something. Like I didn't know I was going to say a miniature alligator just now. I had no idea, right? But in my mind, you start to trust this process of like, if you sit, you're present, you look for the opportunities to take different angles. Those interviews tend to get more exciting for you personally, and they tend, to flow really well. So I wouldn't change anything, but I think all of that stuff is just repetitions, just like anything else that you get where you start to refine your processes.
I feel like I'm so bad at improv, and that's why I do outline my questions in advance, but I end up going off script. And I think to your point, the more you do it, the more you're comfortable with, let's go off script. It's fine. You've gone somewhere, so let's go there. And you have the confidence that, okay, naturally, we're going to get back to something else along the way. And I think it is just repetition where if you don't feel like you're confident in improv, that's me. I don't feel confident in improv. The only way to feel better about it is to like, do it again, do it again, do it again.
It is. I've never felt comfortable in improv. You sent me 12 questions, maybe a little bit more. When you send these questions, Jessica, when you look back at an interview, how many of them do you think you actually addressed?
In most instances, I do address them because sometimes I go off script. It can just run, but I do often kind of like try to flow it in the direction that it was flowing because I'll also batch them into three major topics. Like our major topics today are about you, about fitness, about podcasting. And so even within the three, like, can I at least stay home when I'm in one topic? Can I at least get everything that I was thinking of within that one topic and then jump up to the next? My brain is more of like the structured brain. When I'm in an improv kind of setting, it does go completely off the rails sometimes.
I'm like you. I like to have three major like talking points, like bullet points, right? I think the difference over time, you'll probably just have your own flow of how you know it's going to go. I don't think I'll ever want to go back and listen to my first 50. To be honest with you, I have no interest. Maybe they were okay, maybe they weren't, but I didn't really care. And I think that's the biggest thing. When people start podcasts, that's why I admire what you're doing here is like, you're just going, right? Like you're committing, you're going for it. I'd say like, hey, if you're going to start a podcast, awesome. I can think of very few reasons why people shouldn't start a podcast except a lack of commitment. I'd say when I say that's like do 100 episodes, commit to that. And people are like, ooh, I think I'm just going to do 10 and see how it goes. We're like, well, then don't do it because you're going to learn so much along the journey. You're probably doing it for the wrong reasons. Like if you're looking at this linear path of like, I just want to create a big audience, I want to sell a bunch of products, I want to be a rock star. Okay, great. Maybe that's possible, right? Maybe. But for most people, that's not realistic. You have to look at the tertiary benefits of podcasting for what we've talked about previously is like building your network, firming up your network, general curiosity and learning, the fun of the conversation. I love it because this is one of the few hours of the week where my cell phone's completely off and I'm focused just on my conversation with Jessica. Like that's cool to me. Like you don't get that nowadays. It's very rare. So there's all these other benefits to podcasting. And I think it takes a while to really figure it out. And if people are out there like, yeah, I want to do a podcast, but I'll just do like 7 or 8. Because I think most podcasts end at episode 7, which breaks my heart. I'm like, you didn't even give it a go. That's not even a legit go. You're probably just now getting close to 50. You're probably starting to figure things out, your flow, right? And by 100, you're going to be like, I'm super confident. Like, this is great. I'm really enjoying this. I'm fine, what type of guests I want, the direction I'm going, who I want to serve, like all those things. If you're listening, do it, like commit to it.
And there is that element of start before you're ready and just start. I think I'm on the 4th microphone setup I did to do. You're just like evolving as you go and just like in it and trying. And I think it is fun because when you're in a podcast kind of community, like when you reached out and you were like, oh, I like what you're doing with your podcast. Great. Like, let's podcast because podcast people love to also podcast. And it's just like almost this like subculture of content that I really enjoy almost more than short form content because there is that dynamic of like, I'll be on your podcast, you be on my podcast, let's podcast and just get together and talk about stuff. And it does tend to go everywhere across a lot of different topics, but it's all in the spirit of like, let's have richer conversations than 30-second short form clips.
Yeah. Everything you said is beautifully said. It is really cool. Like I'm doing a presentation next week for the Wellness Growth Mastermind about podcasting. 250 entrepreneurs or executives in this group. What can I tell them that they don't get, that they're not seeing about the podcast world? I think unless you're really looking at it or you're part of it, what you described is like this ecosystem of people with this common interest. If I talk to a podcaster who's doing podcasts about, I don't know, Game of Thrones, there's a kinship there. Well, tell me like, what kind of mic? What is that? A Blue Yeti? Oh, that's a really nice mic, right? Like, what are you using? Like, how are you doing? Who do you use editing? It's this activity culture thing that's also an occupation, and yet it's very unique. And best part is like, it's super low cost and anybody can get into it. And I agree, like start before you're ready for most people, unless you have a very specific business case. Like the people like Callie and Casey Means, they started their podcast, The Levels podcast, big budget, right? Really nice studio. Immediately big guests coming in. Like that's going to take some money and it's going to have probably a pretty immediate impact because you're going to get like high level guests coming in and very specific topics and high production costs. So it's going to jump pretty quickly. But for most people, that's not an option. So you're just going to kind of grind it out.
Yeah. Everyone was kind of saying, wouldn't you record in a studio? Don't you want to go to a studio? I'm like, why? To your point, the 0 to 100 are going to be rough. So let's just do it quick and dirty. Let's do it from the house. Like, who cares? My dog's right here. Maybe he starts freaking out. It doesn't matter. I know you posted recently on LinkedIn something along the lines of like, if I were to start a podcast from scratch. Like, here's some things that I would do. And so for those who aren't following you on LinkedIn, the very few that aren't following you, outline that post for us. Like, what would you do if you were starting from zero?
Yeah, I think that one specifically was I would start an email list right away. It took me years to kind of get it going. And I regret that because that's such a great engagement tool. Now with, thousands of people I have on it, like I shoot value out to them, it's summaries, it keeps them connected. Not everybody can listen to all my episodes, but I know they're connected with the flow and the guests and what the information we're trying to get out through that. The open rates and the click rates are ridiculous. And it's shocking to me even sometimes, but I don't really ask them for anything, right? I have some sponsor ads and things like that. But I think that's number one is like create an email list. Even if it's 5 people, it's your mom and your uncle and whoever, like, get that together, start shooting it out, have somewhere where people can sign up for it. And just like any other business, I mean, you're a marketer, Jessica, like, the power of an email list. Like it's still to this day one of the best things you can have because you always have it. Spotify could change today and change the algorithm. That would suck. Maybe, I get wiped out for some reason because of naughty words or whatever I do, but I would always have my email list, right? So I think that's number one. Number two, like start low budget, start before you're ready, and have a clear idea of who you want to serve. When I started Future of Fitness, I selfishly wanted to serve myself. I want to interview people and find out, to use the Gretzky quote of like, I want to skate to where the puck is going, right? I want to be out there when it comes to like technologies in our space or trends or new brands or whatever it may be. So I just started interviewing people I know, started interviewing people who are mentors, started getting people who I really looked up to. I remember when Dan John came on, I was like, oh, like Dan John, holy shit, he answered my email, right? And then it just kept going. And that was always the ethos. It's like, I want to help myself, but the industry along with it skates where the puck was going. And it took me a little while to figure that out, but that was really what I wanted to do. And hence the name of the Future of Fitness. So I think having kind of a clear vision and mission of why you want to do this is really clear. But those are the big ones. There's a million different ways to do this thing.
Well, and through your podcast, you kind of took yourself from I'm a gym owner, I'm like a consultant, and you really like put yourself into a industry expert seat by building that podcast.
I didn't really think that way, to be quite honest with you. I think what happens is when you do an interview-based format, I used to do this as a gym owner. I tell a lot of gym owners who I used to work with to do it. Is you sit on stage or behind a microphone or whatever it may be in a studio, and you're interviewing someone who you would consider a caliber or 2 up within a specific knowledge set, or 10, right? Like when I interview Kelly Starrett, I'm always amazed with, this guy's freaking brilliant, right? Or Rob Wolf, or all these people have been my idols for a long time. I think by nature, whether it's intentional or not, I think people in the industry will start to relate you with that level. For my case, foolish. Don't do that. I am not anywhere near Kelly Starrett. But I think people start to do that, which is an interesting thing. If you're giving people information, I look at it, I'm more of an advocate for our industry. Is like, I want to extract as much as I can from my guests so that people can use it, like actionable knowledge, so that people can actually apply that to what they're doing, or maybe it provokes some thought that maybe they didn't have before, see things through new angles. Maybe you're right. I don't know. But I think I'm still, probably it's insecure, but I'm always looking at other people like, wow, they're really smart and really influential. I just want to get to know what they know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I emailed Gary Vee to be my episode 55. Emailed him twice, maybe 3 times, sent him a letter, getting like rejected by his people, the layers of people between him and me. It's kind of like, I think there's a lesson in growing with who wants to grow with you. And so whether it's like people who are talking to you and putting you on, but then you're also putting them on, it's like this mutually beneficial relationship of like, I don't want to say clout sharing, but it is clout sharing when you're consistently out there trying to share other people's clout. It inherently like creates clout for you as a creator. It's just a very interesting podcast world. And I mean, that's, I think, why you're doing what you're doing and like how you're trying to amplify certain podcasts, because it is such a powerful way to like build personal brand as well as B2B brand, I guess.
Amazing for branding. There's a lot of leverage to be had within the podcast ecosystem, right? Like what you were talking about. I gave the example of Dan John. No one knows who Dan John is. He's a legendary strength coach. I looked up to him in my coaching career and I went to a couple of his workshops. And when I emailed him to be on my show, it was like episode 10, emailed me back right away. Like, yeah, no problem. Here's my phone number. Call me tomorrow. I'm like, right? Like, oh my God, I was so nervous. You do grow with other people, but I would urge people too, is like, go for the Gary V's. I want people to understand this. 98% of the time when I go to somebody and ask them, hey, would you be on my podcast? They don't ask my numbers. No one ever asks. It's almost considered rude to ask, like, no, I'm inviting you into my house. Well, what's for dinner? right? No one does that. Well, how nice is your house? What neighborhood are you in? Like, no, I'm inviting you to dinner. You can make the choice, yes or no, right? I think there's something about like going big, like go for the Gary V's, right? I emailed Andrew Huberman every quarter for 2 years before I gave up. I never got him. But I got like, a bunch of emails saying, hey, he's really busy. We appreciate you reaching out. I think there's a lot to that too. Don't be scared to ask. The worst thing you hear is no. A lot of times you'd be surprised. Every once in a while, something sneaks through and you get a yes, right? I think especially in our space, fitness, health and wellness, whatever it is that we have now as an industry, like you start to grow up with people. When I was 30 years old and just kind of getting started, there's certain people like I would see Rob Wolf was someone who was very active in the CrossFit space back then. I still talk to him, not super frequently, but frequently enough. And I watched him elevate. Right. And I was kind of, I want to be, part of that. And Kelly Starrett was in that same window and Gray Cook and like all these people back in that day. And now they've moved up and they're all legends now. And there's a next generation that's coming up. And I think through the world of podcasting, you kind of support each other until you reach one day, you're like, wait, are we the old guard now? Yeah, like we are. And that's kind of weird. But, we have this network and we're tight and it's great. It's this development of the network and rising together, sharing and swapping audiences and growing each other's podcasts. I mean, you look at some of the best in the world, you look at the Joe Rogan podcast, you get in the Joe Rogan ecosystem and you're going to grow, right? And there's certain people that he had on early and they all grew together. I think that's really cool too. So yeah, that's a very acute observation.
I want to move into fitness talk because we overlap so much there. And I think we would be remiss to not chat it up at least a little bit on fitness topics. So you definitely have a front row seat to the fitness industry. I like to think I have a front row seat. What are you watching trend wise that you're really interested in right now?
Yeah, super interesting right now, the Maha movement.
Explain this. I don't even know what you're referencing. You're catching me off guard.
Make America healthy again. So it's the political will at the top of the chain. RFK Jr., I think Callie Means just got Surgeon General, very controversial. But a lot of the people that are now getting into these positions, I don't care what you think about politics, but right now it's a very interesting time for fitness and health where people are trying to address fundamental chronic disease and things like that. I don't know how it's going to play out for our industry. I don't know if like the FIT Act is finally going to get passed and now gym memberships can be, used in pre-tax income, whatever it may be, something. I feel like we're finally having alignment of like consumers want better health. Part of that's pandemic, part of it's a lot of reasons. There seems to be maybe some political will that aligns and a lot of trends as far as health sciences and democratization and personalization of all these things that can happen. So that whole thing I think is converging very much into what could be a very, very interesting 3.5 years. But I don't know. I'm just interested to see what that trend goes. I'm hopeful. I think there's GLP-1s, right? That's a very big topic that seems to come up and people are really interested to see how that's actually going to affect our industry. And I'm very skeptical that the drug is actually going to drive people into gyms. This is just me and I want to be wrong. I think people start taking a magic pill. I think they're going to lose some weight. Some of them may get active. Most of them will probably just be like, that was easy. I'll just keep taking the drug. So that's another one. The other thing is I think there's a general rebrand of our entire industry, and I'm trying to figure out what it's going to be. Whether we know it or not, it's happening. Fitness seems like an antiquated term. Wellness is like kind of bland. Like who just wants to be well, right? I want to be like really healthy, right? And then there's longevity and there's preventative health and there's health optimization. Like all these terms are being thrown around. I feel like the whole industry is getting under a rebrand. So those are the big ones I would say for sure.
Are there trends within or are there concepts within those trends that you're watching or brands that you think are well positioned to leverage the trends that you referenced?
Longevity is really interesting. It's the wild west of longevity. People still don't know like what's the right service offering, what's the right pricing, how do we curate our menu of offerings? And I throw in like a lot of the recovery stuff. So the contrast therapies, the red lights, cryos, and then also, the administration of peptides, HRT, stem cells, how that integrates with strength training and good fitness and nutrition. Like how is that whole thing going and how much are people willing to pay for it and what are they willing to pay for within that? So that's very young and I think it's going to evolve into something really interesting. One of the guys that you've had on this podcast, Jim Donnelly from Human Not Health, I think he's brilliant. This guy knows what he's doing. This isn't his first rodeo. He's been highly successful. So that's one that I'm looking at as a potential leader in the space. But everything else it's super expensive, right? If you want the full gamut of all the fun stuff within longevity, you got to pay. I don't know how many people are willing to pay for it. So we'll see. But that's the concept I'm really curious about.
For sure. And, I want your opinion. You've had a front row seat on CrossFit really for 20 plus years. So we know CrossFit is looking to sell or have a new owner. Like who do you think should buy CrossFit and how can that brand be saved?
Well, here's what I know about CrossFit. There's never any shortage of drama within the CrossFit world.
Why is that?
I don't know.
There's always something going on.
Have you ever had one of those friends who's like, there's always drama in his or her life, right? That's the CrossFit of the fitness space. There's always drama. There's always something going on. I'm really enjoying the memes and the rumors that go around, because that's another thing CrossFit's really good at, is rumors. And I saw one today. It was like Rich Froning is president, is the new CEO of CrossFit. I do believe there should be a separation of sport and fitness within CrossFit. I've always said that, like, the sport of CrossFit is very different than the general health and wellness CrossFit that was the original vision of Greg Glassman. So I always thought, like, maybe one of them should be sold. Like, let's sell the CrossFit Games to High Rocks, right? Or something like that. Give it to someone who's really good at events, Spartan, whatever it may be. Have them run it. Great. Have it be an independent sport. Now let's hand off the actual affiliates to someone who's really good at running gyms, right? Who really understands, maybe not a franchise model or a corporate model, but someone who really understands that. But ultimately, the biggest value in CrossFit is that it's a brand. Like, it is a globally recognized brand. And I think a company that truly understands the power of brand, Nike comes to mind, first and foremost. I mean, is there a stronger brand in our space than Nike? Like, if they came in and bought CrossFit, could you imagine how much money they would make? Like Nike CrossFit, right? The shoes, the apparel, like the venues, like the Nike CrossFit training centers, like all these things, they would absolutely dominate. There's a lot of components to that. I think it's most likely going to be a large brand that's going to come in and know exactly what to do with a global brand like that.
Right. You heard it here first. If Nike goes and buys CrossFit, Eric was the one who called it. We covered a lot of ground today. Are there topics that are top of your mind?
If people want to chat, especially about podcasting or launching a podcast or anything related to that, please let me know. If you want to talk about concepts or things that you have within the space that you think are interesting, or are you simply, looking to be connected across the industry, let me know. I'm always down for conversations, but no, this has been, it's been a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of the free consulting that you did with us today on the Society Pod. We really appreciate you and all of your expertise, both in podcasting and in fitness. So thank you so much for being with us today on the Society Pod.
Thank you, Jessica. I really appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Society Pod.